Hello everyone, Alistair Gold here. Well, you know when I say Tottenham Hotspur, it's never just a normal day. Sometimes that brings evenings like last night, which wasn't normal, but in a really good way. That was superb at the King Power Stadium, to be honest. On a very much smaller scale, far smaller, it kind of had a little bit of the Ajax Amsterdam vibes from the Champions League, that semi-final night. Obviously, nowhere near that level in terms of importance. But, just I think the composure the team showed in such a kind of a time-sensitive moment with those seconds ebbing away. It had that kind of vibe to it. And, the goals were, if in case you were living under a rock or completely missed them, those two goals within 79 seconds from Steven Bergwijn. First one, Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. Actually, it was Oliver Skip intercepted the ball. That was the first goal. It was Højbjerg lofting a lovely pass, diagonal ball over the top. Matt Doherty making a terrific run. Gets in the box, gets tackled. The ball breaks to Bergwijn. Bang, half volley, bottom corner. He and Kane both Kane mainly has a little scuffle with Schmeichel trying to get the ball, take it back to the halfway line for their kickoff. From that kickoff, Yuri Tillmans makes an absolute mess of the just a simple pass. He just passes it essentially to Højbjerg. Højbjerg hits it to Kane quickly. Kane turns around and hits an absolute peach of a ball through to Bergwijn. He runs on, slightly heavy touch perhaps past Schmeichel, but just picks out the most perfect shot to get the ball past Soyuncu, who's covering on the line, and the ball goes in off the post, and it was just phenomenal. And then we got that incredible scene with the fans. Bergwijn just lost his mind. He just ran over, jumped over the barrier. Technically, I think probably maybe could have got a yellow card in other circumstances. If I'm sure Leicester fans were whinging a bit about that, but it wouldn't have made any difference to the game because it was game over for them. Probably would have made a difference to Bergwijn instead in terms of being suspended, but it was phenomenal. And you know what? Those Spurs fans deserved it. They'd been brilliant. They sang throughout. They'd backed the team, supported the team. Even when they were behind, they were so noisy. And I thought that was just really poetic, just beautiful to see the Spurs players then go over. And it was almost like just the connection was brilliant. And we had these crazy moments happening. You had Bergwijn leaping in there. You had Tanganga and Doherty kind of grabbing him, stopping him from fully trying to actually go into the crowd, maybe sensitive of that yellow card, which would be in the second one. You had Lucas just randomly ran up and jumped on a steward, who, to be fair to the steward, phenomenally managed to cradle him and hold him in the air. It was, I saw on Twitter someone comparing it to the Pele World Cup image of him held aloft with his fist in the air. I think actually Lucas did it twice, and in one of those there was the moment where he grabbed the woolly hat off the Spurs fan and lobbed it back at him, which was very harsh but very funny. And then Lo Celso had almost like, that there's always that kid in school who wants to copy the naughty kid and maybe does it a little bit later and not as well. And that was like Lo Celso. He jumped on a steward to celebrate with the fans about 20 seconds after Lucas had already left. It was a bit weird, but at least he was at least he was getting involved and enjoying himself. I didn't actually notice at the time. I only saw it in the videos today. The advertising hoardings in front of the Spurs fans broke, and they all kind of piled forward a bit. And to be fair to Leicester stewards, they did really well in containing them in that area, because I think it would have probably spoilt it had they all surged onto the pitch. It probably would have changed what was a really nice moment into a moment of, oh, come on, it doesn't look so great now. It was brilliant though. It was great. And weirdly, if you watch, I didn't even notice until I looked at a video today. If you look at it, Ben Davies is the only player who doesn't run across in the celebrations. He actually ran off to the left to the bench and celebrated with people on there. It was strange, and it reminded me he did exactly the same, I think, after Lucas's goal in the semi-final at Ajax. I'm pretty sure he went over to Poch, whereas everyone else ran to the corner. Maybe it's just a thing he does, a tradition, or maybe just because he's on that side, he wants to celebrate with them. And then at the final whistle, which was only 20 seconds later when the referee blew, Harry Kane pretty much ran over to the fans again, and all his teammates followed him, and they had a really good moment with the fans. And Conte came over. Conte, it was quite funny when he first came over. He started to try and hug his players, and his steward came up to block him. And I think Conte was so in the zone of hugging, he pretty much almost hugged the steward, and I was like, "Oh no, I don't want to hug you," and kind of went off and you could see the different reactions. Like Kane was so hyped up, so passionate. He was roaring at times. He was roaring after the goal, but he was also at the final whistle. You could see him just kind of fist pumping and roaring. He was so hyped up, and he was very good, which we'll come to as well. You could hear loads of people. You could hear Ben Davies shouting. He went over at that point. Højbjerg and Conte having this moment, like kind of Højbjerg is such like an old man, like a mature head on kind of young shoulders, and he and Conte kind of, it's almost like Højbjerg feels he's on the same level. It's very a funny dynamic. And Lorries as well was absolutely ecstatic. It was one of those moments that hopefully comes to something more. It snowballs into something bigger, because I think, it was a patched up Leicester side. You can't take that away from the game. It was a patched up side. But Spurs, played well. And I think had they just won it, 3-0, 3-1, whatever, something like that, without the late drama, I think people probably would have just looked at it as, well, you beat a Leicester side that was under strength. But I think the character shown and the spirit of it all, I think will provide such a boost, such an injection behind the scenes. And it was a game that they, really needs to win as one of their games in hand as well. I think that has a far more positive effect, and hopefully we'll see the benefits of that. But yeah, what I was saying, that, the performance as a whole was so much better. Weirdly, I think the North London derby postponement, which we've all had our kind of feelings on, and it was ridiculous. I mean, I was going to do a video on Monday, and I just thought to myself, it's just going to be a video of me whinging about Arsenal and the decision from the Premier League. Do you know what? I'll leave it a couple of days. I'm really glad it did, because obviously we got the ridiculous drama of last night at the King Power. So, but in terms of the one positive side effect, is that Conte had another full week on the Hotspur Way pitches to work with his players. And I think you saw that in the performance. Everything Conte done, just keep continually getting told by various people about how impressive he is on the training pitch, and how he drills his plans into the players. And I think you saw that out on the pitch. When we all looked at that team sheet to begin with, and you had Winks coming in and playing alongside Skip and Højbjerg, I think we all had flashbacks to Crystal Palace, the match at Selhurst Park. 3 of them played, and Spurs created barely anything. I think they have one shot on target, if that. And I think a lot of us feared, like, ooh, but to be fair, this is where Conte comes into his own, because that was very much 3 same players, but in a very different system. And Spurs on the day had 27 shots on goal, 10 of them on target. They dominated the match. They should have really had it wrapped up at half time. They were that dominant. And yeah, I think every free week that man gets on the training pitch for those players is only going to benefit Tottenham Hotspur Football Club and those players. He's so good. I said this way back, even with my reservations that he might not hang around at Tottenham for long. My biggest thing about Conte was just what an amazing coach everyone says he is. And we're getting to see that. It's still early days. Everything I'm hearing behind the scenes is how excited they are to work with him and how they love it. You can see it. Kane was an absolutely changed player. He really is. He's back. I say changed. He's back to where he was, I felt, yesterday. And another little thing, if you noticed that those players were really hyped up as they were celebrating, I wonder whether there was a little bit extra to that, because I'm told that Conte has promised them, or had promised them, if they won last night at the King Power, then he'd give them a fair few more days off next week, in the first week of this little international break. I was told that, and I was told that if they get a positive result at Chelsea, they get another couple of days added on the end of that, which would take it, I think, almost up to a week off. I think a fair few days off and golfing holidays have already been booked after the events of last night. And to be fair, I know some people will probably now be saying, oh, but you've just said all this training time he has with them on the pitch is everything, every second counts. Yes, that's true. But on the flip side, I'm also told that because of everything he's been doing with them, Spurs players have barely had a day off in the last month. Because, you think about it, it's like even on the days after games, the other weekend game, they're back in the next day to do recovery stuff. So it's not like they're having a day off after a match or anything like that, unless, that's given to them. So, yeah. So they haven't had much time off, and he's been working them hard, getting that fitness level up to where he wants it to be, and also implementing his philosophies, his methods, really intricate stuff going over with them. So I do think that in a team that has such a high level of energy and those demands, I think managing to have almost or potentially a week off of rest, like your own winter break, I don't think will be the bad thing. I think their legs will feel the benefit of that when they come back. And don't be mistaken. That second week, he will work them hard, and he will have almost a full squad to work with. So they, they're getting a week off, but they'll come back to what will essentially be like a mini pre-season for a week. And it can only benefit them ahead of the Brighton game and the matches to come. There's a good run of fixtures to come. So yeah, so if they're smiling at that a little bit more, I think it's because a lot of them were thinking, yeah, we'll go and play golf and stuff. But I touched on it, the Harry Kane's performance. Yes, he was wasteful in a couple of things, but there was so much to like about his performance. There really was. His goal was terrific. Harry Winks, another very good ball over the top from Harry Winks. Not the sideways passer he was. Conte's definitely bringing that different side out of him. Kane runs onto it, turns inside. Soyuncu ends up on his backside, and it's just a beautiful shot right inside the left-hand post. Goes in, a bit like Bergwijn's shot, actually. He had other chances. Before that, I think he'd headed across the crossbar when he was unmarked. Probably should have done a bit better with that. He had the shot. There was a lovely little dribble he did that was cleared off the line, although I think it might have just hit the post, that shot, looking at the trajectory of it. Then he had, just after the goal, Lucas put him through and he blazed over the bar when he really should have got that on target. So, he could have had a hat-trick probably by half-time. But if you take that slightly wastefulness away, the rest of his performance was superb. He was holding up the ball so well. He was coming deep. He was creating, pinging passes around. And there was one moment that just showed the work rate he was putting in where Spurs lost the ball. It wasn't Kane, it was someone else. I can't remember who. But Leicester broke all the way up the pitch and Kane sprinted the length of the pitch from one box to the other, and he got into the box and helped clear the ball and stopped Leicester getting kind of in. And it was a really good. He was knackered. His second half, he was bending over, like taking deep breaths. He really was. But still, in those final crucial seconds, played that pinpoint threaded ball through to Bergwijn. And I'm sorry, that's just top class. I don't know why I'm apologising. I'm sorry, Tottenham Hotspur have a world class player, but it just was. It was phenomenal. I thought he was so good. I thought there were a few other good performances as well. In that midfield trio, I felt Højbjerg was very good. Did a lot of mopping up, the kind of the stuff that maybe goes unnoticed sometimes. And then in those final minutes, he was just involved with both of the goals, crucial in both of them. Winks obviously had that very good assist, had some good little moments. I still want to see him be a bit stronger in the 50-50 balls. I think sometimes he loses too many of those. Skippy had another busy game, productive game. Obviously, he intercepted the ball for the first goal, which Winks then played to Kane. I think the thing with Skippy still is to just the decision making in the final third, because he's got this habit of intercepting and driving up the pitch, and you just kind of see it on his face, this moment of, what do I do? What do I do with it? And that's the bit that he's got to fit. And Conte said that when I asked him about Skip before. He said that's the thing I can improve about him, is the decisions he makes when he's on the ball. And that'll be it. I think, honestly, once he gets that in him, it's going to be one of the Premier League's best young midfielders if he's not already trying to get up to that stage. Very interesting. Gareth Southgate was there as well last night. So Southgate would have seen not only Kane be very good, seen Winks starting to come back to where he was, but also had a good look at Oliver Skip, I reckon, as well. Japhet Tanganga, maybe not the best display. Defence had a funny day. They did some things right, but in both goals, they were a little bit all over the place. It's that makeshift back three at the moment, which we know is not going to be the back three going forward. And players out of position, Sanchez in the centre not looking as comfortable. But the first goal, it was just bobbling about. They weren't doing anything. And the irony was Reguilon came on and actually finally made a tackle and still managed to knock the ball to Daka. And then actually Hugo Lorries, a rare moment when he flapped a bit and the ball kind of, he won't have been happy with that. The ball, we kind of helped it in the net. Second goal, I think you've got to give credit to Leicester for a very good move. Very clever reverse ball into Maddison's path. But then, Spurs a bit all over the place. Sanchez essentially losing Maddison. Tanganga trying to get across and essentially helping the ball kind of bounce over Lorries' dive. Kind of the goals that Spurs are conceding at the moment are all kind of calamity goals. They're not goals that you just take your hat off and say fair play to the opposition. They're kind of architects of their own downfall a fair bit. But I think that defence is going to look very different by the time that the Brighton FA Cup match rolls around. Who else? Matt Doherty. Oh, actually, just want to say on Kane. That's his 18th goal in 17 appearances against Leicester. I spoke to some of the staff at Leicester before the match started, and they're just all the same. Harry Kane will get his obligatory goal. This is one of those things. They just know he's going to score against them, and he did. So just a team he clearly loves to get playing against. But I really feel like he's starting to tread the path back to the Harry Kane we know. That first goal, especially vintage Harry Kane. But Matt Doherty, I want to give him some praise. I really do, because I feel like he made an impact on the game. He came on, if you weren't aware, he came on at half-time. I saw him going through his motions in the break, and he came on for Emerson, who had a poor game, offered pretty much nothing going forward. And Doherty came on, and he immediately pushed on. And do you know what? I'd say yesterday was the first time we've seen the Matt Doherty that Spurs thought they were buying, I'd say. He's had a couple of good matches, funnily enough against Leicester away, last game of the season. But I thought yesterday was a real reminder of the Matt Doherty they tried to sign. Doherty, as he said in his own video on how to pronounce his name that I watched the other day. Doherty. He was good. His movement was so good. His running, he was linking up with Kane straight off the bat after coming on. He had low shot with his left foot that went just wide. He got into the box and he got the ball right next to Schmeichel. He tried to turn and Schmeichel smothered his shot. There was that. And then obviously for Bergwijn's first goal, terrific run from behind. Timed it perfectly. Højbjerg found him perfectly. He kind of ran out of space in the box, but then he's been credited with the assist, because whether he meant it or not, he managed to get the ball to Bergwijn, and Bergwijn obviously lashed it home. Doherty gets a lot of flack, and he's not going to be everyone's favourite player, but I just felt on a night where he was finally playing in the position that he loves, we've seen him on the left in recent matches, which hasn't worked at all. We saw him pretty much coming in and having to play as a right back when we all know he was a right wing back at Wolves. But I just felt yesterday was a bit of a, look, I can do this performance. And I think it's probably, my gut tells me it could potentially end up being a shop window performance rather than one that kind of saves his Tottenham career. It might make teams, potentially his old team, Wolves, look at him and go, okay, yeah, you still got it. Let's try to have a go for him. Because I think he deserves to be playing regular football. He's not a bad footballer at all. We all go overboard sometimes, and when players are either out of form, they come back from injury, they're playing in the wrong positions, and then suddenly everything they do is awful. And he's not a bad player at all. You don't always come out with a stat, but the 2 years with Wolves in the Premier League before Spurs signed him, he created more chances than any other right back other than Trent Alexander-Arnold. So he's not a bad player at all. So, but yeah, I just wonder whether that was a shop window one. But no, fair play to him. Fair play to him. He played well and he made an impact. And of course, you have Steven Bergwijn, who anyone that reads my stuff or watches these videos knows that I'm firmly in the Steven Bergwijn camp. I like him a lot. I think he's been unfortunate with injuries. I think he's had confidence dips when he's missed, shots in front of goal. But I thought last night was just another moment where he just shows that he's a big game player as well. You look at the goals on his debut against Man City, scored against Man United. He scored for Netherlands to take them to the World Cup in a huge match. And again last night, 2 crucial composed finishes within 79 seconds, at both in added time. And I just think he doesn't quite get the credit he deserves because of the frustration about his injuries. And trust me, no one's more frustrated than Steven Bergwijn about his injuries. I just wonder with him whether it's a case of managing his body perhaps a little bit better. He picks up a lot of kind of niggling injuries, little annoying injuries, muscular things. Obviously, he had the ankle problem as well, which is not a lot you can do about it. They're often freak injuries. But, I just wonder whether, and this is just me speculating, just wondering whether he's at a point as a young footballer that he just kind of has to learn a way to stop himself getting these little injuries. But no, I was delighted for him. We've had obviously Spurs have had the bid from Conte. That'd be weird. Spurs have had the bid from Ajax. I think it was 15 million that they turned down. Conte, I asked him about that in the days after. He was very clear. You can see he doesn't want to lose him at all. Says he's a player that they haven't really got anyone that has similar characteristics to him in the squad. And yeah, you look at what he's done. Just this season, even within, around the injuries, started really well under Nuno, who gave him loads of praise. Picked up that, I think it was an ankle injury then, wasn't it? Then he came back, scored that goal for the Netherlands, and he also scored and assisted against West Ham, didn't he, in the Carabao Cup quarter-final. Played really well then. Then he got that other injury. Then he's come back again, and obviously he's done this. So, look, people know my thoughts on Adama Traore, and I know people love transfers. They love new faces over what they already have. But just my only bit of advice would be, don't overlook Steven Bergwijn because you like, I would say a newer model, a different model. Because I've looked up the stats. I've looked at it all. Steven Bergwijn's creation, chances created, goals scored, assists, everything are better than Adama Traore's. They are. So, sometimes the grass isn't always greener, and I just wonder whether if Spurs pay attention to Bergwijn, give him a run of games, try to develop him, you end up getting the player you wanted in the first place. But we'll see what happens. Conte quotes on him. I wanted to say that as well because he was asked again about Bergwijn potentially leaving, and he said, "In the past, when someone asked me about Steven Bergwijn, I was very clear. I said that for me, he is an important player because he has characteristics that in our squad we don't have many creative players. He is very good in 1 versus 1, good to beat the man. He can play striker, he can play number 10. And for me, he is an important player. And we have to try to improve to become stronger, not to lose a player and become less strong. Steven is a player that if he's in good physical condition and he has good fitness, he can start the games. Or he can come in and change the game. For me, I think he's an important player, and you know very well the player has to be happy, and I think the player is happy to stay with us and play for Tottenham." And that says it all. When you've got a manager like Antonio Conte, one of the best in the world, telling you he likes you, he told me the other day I can count on Steven Bergwijn. If he says that, then you're a good player. You are. It's as simple as that. And I'd love to see him kick on now. These are the kind of nights when careers can be a turning point for a career. And I hope he absolutely snowballs from here because I think he's got everything in his game. I just think the confidence thing was that last little bit. He scored plenty of goals for PSV. But then obviously, yes, of course, Eredivisie, a slightly easier league to score in. But I think it's also about confidence. And he had those little run of misses, didn't he? I think there was a big miss against Liverpool. And fans got his back. I think Mourinho had a little bit of a kind of brought it up in the press conference afterwards as well, which, is his right to do because it was a big miss. But I just feel confidence-wise, Bergwijn went on a bit of a kind of downward trajectory last season. And I think he's a talented player. Nuno raved about him as well. And it seems to be the pattern that every manager seems to rave about him. So they must see something. So Bergwijn, big thumbs up. It really was. It was excellent. I was so happy for him. He's a funny character. When you interview him, he's very how do I put it? He's a very serious man. He's very doesn't like media. He doesn't like interviews. He's very gets to the point, says what he wants, heads off into the sunset. But I don't think he's like that with the players. I think he seems to be very popular with the players. Højbjerg was asked about him yesterday, and he was last night, and he was very much like, I'm not worried about Steven Bergwijn. Steven Bergwijn has fantastic qualities. We all love him. And, that seems to be the sense that I certainly get. All the players are very, very much Bergie fans, Stevie fans. And it'll be interesting to see what happens with him now. I really hope it's good things. So, what does that mean? What does that match mean? I was trying to think if there's anyone I've left out an analysis there. I don't think so. I think we've covered everyone. Lucas had a bit of a quieter game. Probably not up to kind of his recent levels, but it didn't really matter on the night in the end. I think that's everyone. Reguilon started well, had a few kind of promising moments, but faded a little bit as the game went on. But that's more probably a fitness thing, as he only has just recently come back. But yeah, great night, great ending to the night. The drama. That is what football's all about. I don't care as a journalist that I have to rip up most of what I've written and change it all. Because it's worth it. That's what it's a privilege to be there in the stadium for stuff like that. And like I say, just so happy to see the Spurs fans get what they deserved on the night as well. They really did. But yeah, what it means in obviously the grander scheme of things is that Tottenham are fifth, but they've got still 4 games in hand on Chelsea. And and if they could afford to even lose one of those games in hand. Let's say Sunday's match at Stamford Bridge, and still if they won the other 3. They would go above Chelsea. And that's the way. It's just, Spurs are in a really good position. This is the thing. For all the disappointment of the Carabao Cup defeats to Chelsea, and obviously the European issues as well, Spurs are 9 games unbeaten under Conte now. They really are. They're in a terrific position in the table. And that's why, for me, this last 10 days of the transfer window is so crucial. It really is. Because, I'm going to leave that just for a second because we are going to come to the transfer window and we are going to talk about that. But I just want to first talk about the next week or so in terms of who's away. So the only players that will be missing in terms of international duty will be Giovanni Lo Celso, who's been called up by Argentina, Emerson Royale with Brazil, and Davinson Sanchez with Colombia. Romero was not called up. Obviously, he's back now, but not expected to be kind of in match action until after the international break. Sonny's an interesting one. Sonny, obviously, he's been out with his hamstring injury and he wasn't expected to be back until after the international break. However, some quotes which will probably worry Tottenham from Paolo Bento, the South Korea coach. He hasn't ruled out trying to still call Sonny up, even though he's not in the original squad. Because South Korea, I think they've got a game tomorrow, a friendly, and then they've got these 2 World Cup qualifiers, which for them they can qualify. And of course, looking at it from a South Korea perspective, you want your captain and best player to be part of that. So his quotes are, for Son and Hwang Hee-chan, the Wolves player, who have physical issues, I'll keep considering them. It's important to make a decision at the right time. We don't have to make a decision now. And he said that today. So that very much sounds like he's looking at potentially trying to call him up, which I don't think would go down with Spurs at all. You want Sonny to be fully rested and ready for when they come back. A situation to kind of keep an eye on there. But in terms of the players, obviously, like I say, the players still at Hotspur Way will get time off to go and have a rest and do their golf, whatever it is they want to do. But then that second week is going to be very crucial. If you think about it, we talk about the defensive issues, but that second week, Conte could essentially spend the entire week, well, part of the week, obviously, in the defensive aspects, drilling Dyer, Romero and Davies as his back 3. And that looks to be his first choice back 3, doesn't it? So he can work with all 3 of those and get them absolutely doing what he wants. And obviously the transfer window. Let's get to that because that second week of the international break, he may have some new faces to work with. From what I understand, Tottenham are confident they will get at least one in and hopefully more. I said this in an article this morning and some of the Twitter aggregator sites took that sentence out and I could see a Spurs fan going, 1? Just 1? And it's like, well, at least 1. The hope is more than 1. But yeah, no, there's a confidence that they'll get some faces in. There's only 11 days left for Fabio Paratici, the managing director of football at Tottenham. He was out on the pitch before the match last night. I did the obligatory Paratici on his phone pic because it amuses me, the range of reactions. People get very annoyed by it or people like it. It's quite funny. It's literally a man on his phone. He could be ringing his mum for all I know. I don't know if his mum's still around or not. I don't know. I could have spoken entirely out of turn there. Let's say, a family member. He could have been, doing whatever. He could have been playing a game on his phone, that Wordle that everyone seems to be playing. Or he could have been speaking to an agent or a club. He could have been doing some work. But yeah, poor old Paratici, he's getting it from the fans at the moment because obviously the lack of movement in the transfer window. I'd say for him, he's only been in the job, what are we looking at? When did it come? June? So 6 months or so, if that. Is it even 6 months? No, I think he officially started in July. So, roughly 6 months. And he's just had his first window. He had to build a squad for one manager. And now he's having to kind of tear that up and try and build a new squad or start shaping a squad for a completely different manager. So, yeah, I don't know. I think we'll, it's as we've said, the three players, you've heard me say this before, the three players, the club have decided on, they want, or positions, are a right wing back, a striker, and Conte's asked for a central midfielder if possible as well. So, we all know who the right wing back who is likely to be the right wing. What certainly Spurs want, certainly Paratici really wants, is Adama Traore. I'd be prepared in the next few days to see probably briefings from both sides of the divide on this, both clubs putting out various things. From what I understand, Wolves want 20 million and Spurs are well aware of that and are doing what Tottenham do. They will look to try and get a little bit off that, or they will look to do a loan with an obligation to buy. They will look for some way to free up funds for other moves rather than pay exactly what it is. It's just what Tottenham do. And it frustrates a lot of people. I'm well aware of that. But I think we're now at the stage now where, you're not going to get any player, probably not going to get any player in ahead of Chelsea, are you? It'd have to be incredibly quickly done, which I can't see at this late stage. I think, even to be registered in time, I don't think that happens. So you now know you have the rest of the window to do the deal. So, like I say, keep an eye on, you'll see both clubs kind of putting out information over the coming days over what has happened, what hasn't happened. Some of it will no doubt be true. Some of it will be to force the hand of the other club. And but I'd be surprised if Spurs don't push to try and get this one over the line. There's only so long you can kind of tiptoe around a player and not just do the deal and get it done. For all of my worries about Traore's end product and also what people around Wolves tell me about his defending, if you were going to put him in a right wing-back role, I can only go back to my original comment on Antonio Conte, one of the world's best coaches, and he improves players. He does. He improves players a lot. So if he can improve Traore and take a lot of the attributes he has and improve on the things that he does badly, it may well work. I still hold the belief that if you're going to sign a right wing back, just sign a right wing back. But if they believe he's the best option for this converted role, then who am I? So that's Traore. We shall. It'll be interesting to see where kind of fans lie on that now. I think there's a fair few fans that are very excited. I think there's a fair few fans that are not too keen on him. But I wonder whether we get to a certain stage where the frustration grows over not having a signing actually just makes you want him. He's the kind of player that I do wonder whether he'll probably score or get an assist on his debut if he comes to Spurs, and then you won't see another goal. His pattern is a goal or assist every 9, 10, 12 games. And then I hope he doesn't fall into that pattern for Tottenham if he does sign for him, and that Conte can get more of a consistent end product to him. He scored the other day, didn't he, for Wolves, and that was his first Premier League goal or assist for about 28 matches. But there you go. I don't want to be too down on him because I really hope if he does come, he's a massive success and Conte improves him because he's an exciting player. I just want there to be... almost said something that sounded a bit dodgy there. I'm not going to say that. An ending to the excitement. That's probably slightly less dodgy sounding than the exact expression I was about to use. So that's right wing back. Obviously, they've looked at others. I think there's Jed Spence, the Forest player who's on loan from Borough, certainly is one that they've kind of kept an eye on. Whether he would be seen as a now player is another thing, and they've also looked at Benjamin Mensah from Peterborough again. Another one who would be for the future. Less so than Spence. I think Spence is probably more a player that is probably closer to being the Premier League product. But yeah, it's clear Traore is the one they want. It's obvious. In terms of central midfielder, obviously the Frank Kessie links aren't going to go away. I still think that would just be so difficult to do this month. Right now he's away with the Ivory Coast in Cameroon, playing in the Africa Cup of Nations. If Ivory Coast go all the way, he will be there. The finals around February 8th, February 9th. Even to get to the semis, I think the semis are in 3rd and 4th of February. Essentially, to sum up, he will be in Africa probably beyond the end of the transfer window. It's not the be-all and end-all for a transfer. I think Brian Hill's transfer was done while he was away at the Olympics, or he was already in Japan for them. So it's not the be-all and end-all, but to also be in what is an important competition for him and his country, difficult time to do a deal. And on top of that, AC Milan going for the title. They're in second place. For him, this is a chance to leave with a Serie A title, which would be a huge thing. And also, from a financial point of view, as I've said before, players on free transfers in the summer very rarely decide to move into January because they're not going to get the same wages. They're not going to get the huge signing on fee they'd get if there's no transfer fee involved. Christian Eriksen was probably one of the rare occasions I've seen that in recent times with Tottenham. But yeah, Kessie would... I found it quite funny that Conte, in the quote that I've read out there about Bergwijn earlier, he said... he has characteristics that in our squad we don't have many creative players. It did make me wonder, so why isn't a creative player one of those players you want this window? Because, you would have heard me screaming and ranting at the end of the summer transfer window, why didn't they just get an advanced playmaker? Still haven't got that Eriksen replacement. And I wonder whether maybe with the central midfielder Conte's asked for, perhaps that's what he's looking for, someone that can do a bit of everything. Kessie's a bit of an all-rounder. It can be a defensive midfielder, but I think he's also got about 5 goals in 12 Serie A performances, something like that. He's got quite a decent goal rate for what you'd term as a defensive or a box-to-box midfielder. Got a couple of assists as well. So perhaps that's what they're looking at. But again, I think a January deal would be difficult to do. It's not going to say it's impossible, but I think it would be a difficult one to do. The striker one's the most interesting for me in terms of there's very few names that are kind of out there. Spurs keeping, everything to do with that is quite close to the chest. I don't know whether it's close to the chest or just shows the difficulties Spurs have in signing strikers. I know people don't like to hear it, but there's the Harry Kane issue. There is, you have to have a player of a certain quality to play alongside him. Obviously, you would oust Lucas or a Son if you're going to do that. So to then go for a player that is going to likely be a backup player or a support striker, those kind of players less willing to come because of the getting less minutes, and especially in January it becomes even more difficult. So I wonder whether that's why there's so little going around about a striker, and whether it will just be this sudden surprise loan signing of someone or of a player that you're like, whoa, that's come from left field in the final days. But Tottenham do need it. They do. Bergwijn showed, of course, last night that he can play alongside Kane. That was the instruction Conte said to him, to get up right alongside Kane and be like a second striker, and he did. He did it very well. But in terms of filling in for Kane, Conte believes he can. I'm still not entirely convinced of that. I still think they need a natural number 9, really. And they've got players going out the door. Obviously, lots of Tanguy and Ndombele stories that we're going to see. Latest is PSG, who have made contact with Spurs about bringing him in. The Tanguy situation's a really complicated one. he wasn't involved in the squad again. He's doing this individual training that I've been made aware of, which Conte essentially confirmed the other day when I asked him about it. Doing this like conditioning training, which, Tongi, I'm told, is in the best shape of his Tottenham career. So I don't think he's someone that is unfit. I think it's just a case of an unhappy player, a player the club would like to move on now, a player who would like to leave the club, but only for the right club. And there's a little bit more to it. There's certain difficulties in terms of where Tongi would go, where he can go, and who would pay the money for him, who would pay the amount of wages he's on. And Tottenham obviously wanting a fee rather than a loan would be preferable, or at least a loan with a fee at the end of it. There's a lot to the Tongi stuff, and there's probably more to come on that as well. So one to keep an eye on with him and exactly where it goes. Then you've got Dele Alli, who again on the bench and completely unused. It's another manager who's not really playing him. He needs to go and play football, but there needs to be real concrete interest in him, and bids and loan move again that actually has some finance behind it as well. Otherwise, it's almost in these COVID times, and when you can get COVID and also injuries, it gets to a point where it's almost like, is it worth letting him go for nothing when you could have him there as as depth to your squad in case you get sudden problems? So there's Dele, Matt Doherty, as I said earlier. I think he probably needs to go and get some regular football. But again, someone has to come in. And whether that is Wolves, I think there's been a little bit of interest there. I don't think it would be part of the Traore deal, but potentially, would be worked on alongside it. If Wolves want him back, if they're serious enough about bringing him back. And then you've got Joe Rodon, who desperately needs a move. He really, really, really does. Preferably, I'd like him just to go on loan. But, Tottenham may see a play there they can get some money for to help bring in other people, and perhaps that happens, or a loan to buy. Like I say, I still think there's a player in there. But, that would be a sad one, to be honest, if he were to leave permanently, because I do think there's a player there, and he's just had another player with a couple of unfortunate injuries at key times. But I think he's one that's going to go on and be a very good Premier League player somewhere else if Tottenham let him go. Who else? We've had Dylan Markanday leave this week. Dylan's a very talented young player, but unfortunately, the situation had arose where Spurs had made him a good contract offer, then improved that contract offer when he turned down, and unfortunately he turned it down again, and which is very much his right, to go and have a better shot at regular football or a better shot at first team football at Blackburn Rovers. And in the end, Tottenham, for a young player who's played 15 minutes of first team football in European third tier competition, they've ended up getting a little chunk of money for him and a big sell-on fee. So they've probably done better than they really should have out of that deal. And for Dylan, it's a big chance for him. He's got a 3-year deal at Blackburn, an option for another year. He's already made his debut, got about 22 minutes for them, I think it was last night against Hull. So that's instantly paid dividends for him. Tony Mowbray saying some big things about him and how good he can be in the future. I really hope he makes it. I really do, because he is a talented player. It's been unfortunate with the number of people in front of him at the club, and then they brought in Brian Hill in the summer ahead of him again to kind of play on that right side of a right wing role. It's just been unfortunate that just for some reason or another he's been involved in first team training, but the last 4 managers just haven't really wanted to take a chance on him. If you wanted to be utterly brutal, then perhaps when you get that chance, you kind of have to take it. And he didn't really do anything in those 15 minutes. Was it against Vitesse, wasn't it? It's difficult though, because Spurs struggled that day. Of all the matches to try and make a difference, that really was a tough one to do that in. So I wouldn't probably read too much into that. But yeah, look, best case scenario now, he goes on and does very well, and perhaps Tottenham try to bring him back. He's a Tottenham fan born and bred, so I'm sure he'd love the chance one day to come back and prove the club wrong, as it were. Or in the next scenario, he does very well, gets a big money move from Blackburn. I mean, he could technically be a Premier League player next year if Blackburn get up. And And then if he does get a big move in the future, then Tottenham get a big old cut of that fee. But, honestly, do wish him the best, because last 18 months, his improvement has been incredible. Really is. He'll be 21 this summer. I just really hope he goes on. I think he could be a very good professional footballer. And, best of luck to him. What else we got? Hugo Lorries. I think I said in the last video that, that's just now a matter of time. It could be announced pretty soon, I reckon, in the coming days. As I told you last time, from what I understand, his modest demands were deemed more than reasonable by the club, and Conte is certainly saying it should be just a matter of time now. So hopefully we'll hear about that. Hopefully the goodwill of last night's match, we'll get to maybe hear that in the days ahead. It would be nice to get some kind of announcement before the Chelsea game as another little booster for everyone. Club captain sticking around. Like I say, Chelsea on Sunday. I think the key thing with the transfer window, what I really wanted to say as well, before I move on from that, is that I've used this expression before, but I can only keep saying speculate to accumulate. And I think that's really what Spurs need to do now. Because I think there was a real feeling that this coming summer, was going to be the crunch one. The crunch one for Conte, crunch one for Tottenham, and having a season that really was a Conte demand season. A season where you're actually going to try and challenge for things. But I think we're now in a position where Conte's done so well since coming in that Tottenham are in a position where they're in a good place to get into that top four, and others are faltering. And I just think if Spurs can find the money, and yes, I know that sounds ridiculous to people, with a billionaire person that owns the company, that owns the company, that owns the company, that owns Spurs, and all this sort of stuff, and the money that they would no doubt hear of, it's a tough one. I'm not going into the finances too deep, but essentially, Spurs are run very tightly. You know that. It's a very tight ship. They don't take risks. And I just feel that this one would be a calculated risk. Because I think if you give Conte 2 to 3 players in the next 10 days that can bolster his squad of a decent level, I think Conte finishes in the top 4 with Tottenham. I think he does. And in that case, you're then making all your money back and then some by getting into the Champions League. And it all has a knock-on effect for everything. Sponsorship, marketing, merchandising, everything they want to do gets a big old boost. And I just think now, don't just look towards next season. Yes, I know you were looking to maybe just build some foundations for this season, but you can do that and achieve now. So just push that little bit more. It's something that we've all been screaming for the club to do for ages, and I just think these next 10 days are the one to do it in. Just push. You'll get the rewards, I think, of a top 4. Previously, I would have said top 5, I think, was what Tottenham were probably going to go for. But the way things have shaken up now, and the position Spurs find themselves in, I don't see why they can't go for the top 4, and especially with some new faces. I think it's a calculated risk that's worth taking. I really do. But yeah, Sunday this weekend. Selection decisions, of course. Does Bergwijn start? Do you bring him in? Personally, I think he deserves to be rewarded with a start if he's fit enough to play. But the flip side to that is, does the 3-man midfield, which did well, the 3-5-2, I think, probably is the best formation to take Chelsea on with. Do you kind of weaken that by bringing in Bergwijn when he kind of deserves to play? It does really work both ways. And you've got on the right wing-back, does Matt Doherty also deserve to play again? Would he provide more of an impact than Emerson? Or do you need Emerson's maybe better energy levels and perhaps better defending to cope against Chelsea? I just wonder, with Chelsea and their possession play, and Spurs, whenever at Stamford Bridge, don't see a lot of the ball in terms of possession. So do you need that 3-man midfielder and a more energetic wing-back? I don't know. It's... this is where Conte earns his big bucks, I guess, is in matches like that. Chelsea are stuttering a bit, but didn't have to really do much to beat Spurs in those 2 legs. They didn't. So it's going to be another game that probably most Spurs fans aren't going to look forward to. I'd love Spurs to just continue that momentum from Wednesday. It'd be really good. If they could do that and take that into the break, get a couple of signings, that would be fantastic, wouldn't it? Can you imagine? Take 4 to 6 points or whatever from this week, get a couple of 2 or 3 new signings in, Players get their rest next week, come back for a second week with absolute Conte drilling into them what he wants from them. They go into what is their second half of the season, essentially, absolutely in the right trajectory, frame of mind, mood, morale, whatever you want to call it. Honestly, it could be huge. So, fingers crossed. Honestly, fingers crossed that that's the direction it all goes in for Tottenham. Yeah, I think I covered everything I wanted to cover tonight. I was just trying to think about it. But yeah, again, apologies for not doing a Monday video, but I just felt if I hung on, I'd have kind of more interesting stuff to talk about, and the fates, thankfully, proved right for me. But there you go. Right, I'm going to head off now. I'm sure there'll be much more to come in terms of transfer news in the days ahead. I think it's going to all start ramping up now. We're going to get links with names that are players that are just nothing to do with anything that Spurs are really doing. And you are going to get, like I say, clubs playing the game and trying to force bids, force moves, agents doing the same. But like I say, Tottenham confident they're going to get things done. So fingers crossed, because I wouldn't want to see Antonio Conte if they don't. I think he would be very vocal. He already told me in Tuesday's press conference, that he kind of essentially, to paraphrase, said, I just need people in. It even doesn't matter if they're the best opportunity, get them in. And last night was very similar, said stuff like that. So please keep Antonio Conte happy, because happy Conte, happy Tottenham, I think very happy fans as well. So fingers crossed on that one. So as always, stay healthy, stay safe, look after yourselves, and I shall catch you later. Goodbye.